Good morning, everyone. Hello. My name is Nanette Ho-Coverton. I am the sustainability leader at Spartan Controls, and I welcome you today. I also serve as the co-lead of the digital oil and gas theme for Corinne. So on behalf of Corinne and PTAC, we welcome you to today. I know some of you have been super curious about what else has been happening in the industry with respect to digital solutions, and I'm happy to share some insights today from 3 different groups. First group will be Carrie and Jeff, representing Blue Marvel and VisWorks. Second will be Sean Greenwood, representing Canadian UAV, and Paul Ritchie representing Ausperity. But before we begin, I'd like to make sure we acknowledge the land that we're on. It's important to take a step forward in reconciliation. So in the spirit of reconciliation, we acknowledge that we live, work, and play on the traditional territories of the Blackfoot Confederacy, comprising of Siksika, Kainai, Piikani, the Tsuut'ina, the Stoney Nakoda Nations, and the Métis Nation Region 3. And all the people who make their homes on Treaty 7 of Southern Alberta. So thank you for joining us. I wanted to share a few things. Oh, well, I didn't realize we had the land acknowledgement on screen. Sorry about that. Next, I just wanted to share, last week, Corinne actually issued their impact statement or impact report. And so very happy to share with you that there's 5 sectors involved in our world. So funders, adapters, talent, support services, innovators. We're 7 themes where digital is one of the themes. And so far we've held 71 events with 390 member events. So there's over 3,700 members across Canada and across the world. There's over 150 volunteers with over 3,000 hours. I can account for a few of those hours, right, Amber? And about 60 projects funded. So last week, or actually on May 11th, we actually featured a few of the digital themes and the support they received through Corinne and how they're advancing. Tomorrow, we actually have another Project Cafe, May 25th, to talk about some of the reducing, I forgot what theme is tomorrow. Methane emission theme tomorrow. So, wanted to share with you some of the things that's happening today. Real-world applications of digital technologies in the Canadian hydrocarbon energy industry to reduce GHG emissions, ecological footprint, and improve operational efficiency. This is a hybrid event today. There's over 75 attendees, so it's pretty cool. I love that. And I've gotten used to this hybrid world, so welcome. I'd like to welcome to the stage Carrie Smith and Jeff LaFrance.
All right, perfect. Well, very nice to be here this morning with everybody. My name's Carrie Smith. I'm the Managing Director of Blue Marvel AI, and I'm joined here today with one of my fabulous partners, Jeff LaFrance. So I'll let Jeff introduce himself, and then we'll kind of dive into our presentation.
For sure.
Okay, I'll trade you.
Trade.
Boop, boop, boop.
Hi, everyone. Yeah, Jeff LaFrance, co-founder and CEO of a company called VisWorks. And we'll get a little bit more detail around who we are, but certainly the focus of today and our presentation is around the partnership and how we work together to really help Blue Marvel be successful.
That's
so
right.
We're going to talk more about that in detail.
Yeah, we're both tall. There we go.
Thank you, Nat. Coming in from the side with a little support there. Yeah, I'm definitely getting an echo from that. So we'll start off with who we are. So VisWorks is a company, so we are a global company focused on a variety of different industries. The kind of stuff we do is really around human engagement with complex data. So if you think about the data journey going from acquisition side of things into transformation to information, where you collate it together, you start doing some of the analysis on it, that transformation of information into knowledge, wisdom, and ultimately into action. Where we really focus on is that transformational process from information into action. We do that through a lot of the application of advanced visualization technologies and really this idea around how to engage people with data in more intuitive ways, more knowledgeable ways, and drive that deeper understanding that results in better decision-making processes at the end of the day. We use a variety of technologies, and I'll get into a little bit of that in terms of the kind of technologies we use. You've kind of soup to nut kind of technologies, augmented reality, virtual reality, all these kind of buzzwordy things these days, artificial intelligence, machine learning, of course, all these areas, web, mobile, complex data visualization. Ultimately, what we find, particularly in the complex data solutions that we generate, is that it's a convergence of these technologies that's really where the value is. Any one of these technologies is interesting in its own right, but when you blend them together, that's where you create higher value solutions for organizations. And the kind of ways that we work are in a few different areas. One of them is in what I would call normally the custom solution type of services, where unique problem, unique solution. Working with an organization for which there is not an off-the-shelf solution, we can build one for them. So that kind of classic custom solution space. We also find, because we deal with so many different industries and so many different kind of challenges, that there's opportunities for building a solution once and selling it multiple times. So the product development kind of space. So we do a few things in that kind of space. But what we're really going to talk about today, and certainly the work we're doing with Blue Marvel, is in this product co-development space, where a group like a Blue Marvel has an amazing idea, amazing opportunity ahead of them, but doesn't necessarily have all the technical chops to make that happen. And so we work with them together to jointly build and develop this technology, build it out, sometimes also supporting other aspects of the business and other aspects around architecture, business development even, a whole variety of different areas. But really this idea that we are partners, we work together, we jointly try to address what the challenge is and jointly create an opportunity to really build this business out. So that's all from me from right now. I'm actually going to turn it over to Carrie now so she can talk about what that journey looks like from the perspective of our partner in this case and the kind of outcomes that have been achieved as a result of that. So for you.
All right, well, thanks so much, Jeff. And just building on what Jeff said, right? So as a scale up in the technology space, we can't hire all of the technical talent that we need right out of the gate. We can't afford to have a really high-end architect, a cloud security person, like really high-end developers. And so we have to add those individuals as we start to grow and scale our business. And so partnering with organizations like VisWorks as a scale-up really significantly reduces our risk because we can scale up as we start to generate revenue and as we start to build out our business. And so Jeff and his team, you wouldn't know the difference, truthfully. When we work together, they're embedded in our organization. And so his group has provided us with a significant amount of expertise in areas. And as we start to grow, we start to add those people to our team. And then Jeff and his team continue to augment us in different ways. And so what I'm going to show you today, I'm going to introduce Blue Marvel, who we are and what we're focused on and what we're building here in Calgary. And then I'm going to walk you through a demo of one of the products that Jeff and his team has co-developed alongside us. So you might be wondering about our name, right? Blue Marvel, what is that? Are they superheroes? Like, who are these people? So the Blue Marvel name is actually a spin on blue marble. And for those of you that were born in the 70s, I was not, I'm very young. But in 1972, the world was presented in a way that no one had ever seen it before. So this picture of Earth from space was known as the blue marble. And so we're playing a spin on that sort of wordplay, that we are actually providing organizations and industrial operators with visibility into their operations for the first time in a way that they've never been able to see it before either. So what do? Well, we provide targeted insight into areas of operations for industrial operators. We're a wholly owned subsidiary of Spartan Controls, which is a large organization based here in the city of Calgary. Our areas of focus are on energy, emissions, production optimization, asset reliability, as well as plant risk and safety. And so we are working with Jeff and the VisWorks team alongside our growing team of developers to create products that are focused on safety and integrity, reliability and maintenance, performance and optimization, as well as energy and emissions. And that's what we're going to focus in on today, is energy and emissions. So how do we view the opportunity, right? When you think of an industrial operation, there is so much data being collected at the actual physical enterprise level. But how you actually get it up to a data foundation where you can apply applications like Blue Marvel takes a lot of effort and a lot of work. So as you can kind of see here, we have the enterprise operational level, the operational data silos, the data transfer and security, the OT data integration and data foundation layer, and then Blue Marvel actually lives in the L5 level, and this is where the machine learning and the artificial intelligence can actually take place. And so all of this work has to happen before Blue Marvel can even deploy its applications. So we live in the cloud, and that's where our applications live. So I'm going to dive in to talk a little bit about EMIS and why energy management is important. So what are the drivers for energy management, right? Our world has changed significantly, and an effective energy management system directly reduces the amount of energy consumed, right? This translates into savings for our customers, a reduction in energy usage and carbon tax, and it helps our customers abide to the new GHG regulations. And why? Why do we need to do this? So trying to save energy without information is like trying to get somewhere in a strange city without Google Maps. So that's where our products are actually relieving a lot of pain points for our customers. So if you don't have Google Maps in a strange city, it's going to take you forever to get there. You're going to miss all the shortcuts. You'll never know how far you've gone. You'll never know how far you've got left to go, and you might just end up lost. So our energy management products are focused on fixing those pain points for our customers. And so I have those up here on the slide. This is what we hear from people in the space. They have rising energy costs. ESG programs are driving change, and they're trying to comply with the ISO 5001 standard. There's no visibility into how or where energy is being consumed in their facilities and where it's being produced. They need to identify and prioritize their energy projects. They have a desire to manage the industrial energy consumption and production, and they want to identify where some of those trade-off opportunities might be within their facility. So where we're trying to play is that we want to be able to monitor all of your energy usage in all of its forms on site or on an enterprise-wide basis. We can help you identify energy use anomalies and proactively correct or where there's over or under consumption in your operation. We want to be able to track the usage of your energy and consumables on site, and we want to be able to transform the variable costs into a managed expense. And the value of a well-run EMIS program is that we will be able to achieve a 5 to 8% reduction in your overall energy costs. So that's when we know that we've been successful. So I'm going to play a demo of what our product looks like. Apologies that it's not live, but we did a little recording here that I'll ask the IT folks to play so that you can kind of understand what the EMIS product would actually do in an operation.
Blue Marvel's EMIS contains two main pages. The overview page provides flexible navigation of resource use at all levels of an enterprise, and the equipment page provides focused information on individual unit operations. Starting with the overview page, we can see the net operating cost of resources shown in the top right for the entire enterprise, along with a comparison to target. Next, the chart on the left shows the actual versus target in terms of either engineering unit resource consumption or generation, or operating cost or revenue for the process. There's a small navigation bar on the top right of the figure that allows the user to display the chart in either dollar value, percent compared to target, dollar value compared to target, or a Q-sum plot of the cost. Additionally, users can overlay different process variables and can also zoom in by selecting a portion of the figure. Let's look at an intuitive example. Currently, I'm looking at the actual versus target operating cost. However, it's not very clear how much I am under or over consuming compared to my target. By looking at the values in terms of a percentage comparison, the operations performance becomes much more clear. For enhanced clarity, the data can also be viewed as a Q-sum plot over time. Using this sample Q-sum plot, it can be seen that something occurred on the 12th and increased operating costs significantly from there. Here, we can overlay different process variables on top of the plot to identify potential culprits. Up to this point, we've been looking at resource consumption at the highest enterprise-wide level, but EMIS allows us to zoom into plant areas, energy account centers, and individual unit operations for a better view of the system dynamics. By having these features all in one easy-to-navigate dashboard, users can easily identify an issue at an enterprise or site-wide level, then drill down to equipment areas to pinpoint the problem and understand the root cause. The figure below this plot shows the actual versus target for each process equipment within the enterprise, area, or energy account center. Like the previous figure, there's a small navigation bar to select different ways to visualize the data. By default, the overview page shows everything in terms of dollar value. However, the user can see the resource consumption by engineering units or emissions instead by clicking on the Resource tab located at the top left. In addition to breakdowns by plant area, users can also focus on data by resource type using the drop-down menu along the top. By default, resource consumption and generation are combined to provide a net understanding of resource intensity. But users can isolate data related to resource generation and consumption using these navigation buttons along the top. Like the previous page, the users can view the data in different ways and can also overlay different process variables over the figures. Users can also identify the cost breakdown using a Sankey diagram by clicking on the Sankey button located at the top right. The Sankey diagram shows the flow of resource consumption and cost from each area to its associated energy accounting centers and then down to the equipment level. The user can also hover over certain areas to show additional information. The dynamic, flexible Sankey diagram can also hide intermediaries if the information is not required. Finally, to the right, the worst performing equipment relative to target are shown in terms of dollars and percent over consumption. This useful shortlist provides users with a quick way to flag the biggest opportunities for improvement across an enterprise right now. Clicking on any item in the list will redirect you to the page associated with that equipment. Alternatively, the user can select equipment from the panel on the left as well. Here, the user can look at abnormalities and events within each piece of equipment, as well as the equipment's own actual versus target values. There are additional filters located at the top of the page if the user is interested in a more unique subset of data. The Blue Marble EMIS also includes easy-to-use administrative tools for automatically building energy models based on historical data using a variety of statistical techniques. HMI customization features also make it easy to adjust the EMIS system hierarchy, add new sites, areas, or unit operations, update critical information about resource cost and use throughout site, and much.
So that's just a sample of what our product does and allows you to sort of picture, right, how that would be really important for an organization to be providing that level of visibility, and how you can kind of dive in to a specific operating area. You can dive into an area of the operation, a specific piece of equipment, looking at both generation as well as consumption and various costs. So like that blue marble picture where you get to see the Earth from space for the first time, our EMIS is allowing organizations to be able to see their operations in a new way for the first time. And it's overwhelming, right? So where do you start? If you want to start to implement something like this, it can seem difficult. We looked at all 5 of those various layers of all of that data that you have to pull in, and you have to land it in that foundation. But what we always tell people is that you can think big, but start small. So you can focus in on small, like process areas where you have the best data. Start to set those static targets, start to measure, start to see how it performs, and then expand from there. So you don't have to look at this enterprise-wide right out of the get-go. You can look at one small area of your operation as a starting point. And with that, I guess we'll pass it off to our next speaker, and I'm happy to answer any questions during the panel. Perfect. Unless, Jeff, you have anything to add?
No.
No? Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
need to adjust this to my height. Can you hear me okay? No, that's okay. It pays to be shorter. It's okay. Thank you very much, Jeff and Carrie. Now, who doesn't like a good Sankey diagram? Sankey diagrams I don't know, it's a great way to visualize something very quickly. So next up, I'd like to invite Sean Greenwood to step forward and telling us more about advanced data streaming, storage, analytics, and rendition from BVLOS, is that how you're supposed to say it? Drones. Welcome, Sean.
Thank you. Oh. Keep going. There we go. Yeah, I can see it. Okay. Yeah, thanks for everyone for coming today. Sean Greenwood, President, Founder of Canadian UAVs. Just want to kind of introduce the company a little bit. So we basically have 3 different business units: commercial, oil and gas, mostly work with mining. We're in the defense industry, and then we also sell a product. We have an innovation hub called Sparrowhawk, which enables the other 2 operational arms. So the biggest component of that is basically allowing drones or RPAS to fly in mostly civilian airspace. We're the Lockheed Martin distributors for Canada, as well as Textron Systems distributor. We partnered with the Desnethé Group out of Saskatchewan for major projects as an Indigenous 51% JV. And then last month, we were ranked 47th out of 100 top defense companies in Canada, and one of the top 10 in Western Canada. So our claim to fame is what's called beyond visual line of sight. So if your kids have drones, what they're trapped to do or what they're told to do is only fly within visual line of sight. So they have to see the aircraft at all times. That's a requirement from Transport Canada as a result of deconflicting the airspace. And so that's also the same rules and regulations for the commercial industry. Obviously, it's a little more stringent depending on the application. And what we basically invented was a way of getting scale out of drones and out of the airspace. So we took a low-cost marine radar. We applied computer vision to the interpretation of that radar. We inputted that information to a Lockheed Martin ground control system software, and then gave it's like an airspace secretary cues. So it enables an operator to not only see their drone, but all the traffic around it, and therefore enable them to fly safely in that airspace. There's a lot of doodads out there, so SIM cards on drones, other kind of transponders, which are known as cooperative, and then there's basic radar. And it shouldn't be a shock. It won the Battle of Britain. The Germans weren't very cooperative. It's the only thing that can see through smoke, weather, day or night, at the ranges that are required for heavy industrial applications. So it's been about an 8.5-year journey. It started in 2015, February. And we've been able to progress in partnership with a lot of companies downtown, as well as Transport Canada, and also as a result of what's called an ITB investment, so industrial technology benefits. So a large defense prime, in this case, Arcfield, they do the in-service support for the F-18 fleet. They've been doing it for about 40 years. They had a substantial bank of these kind of credits. And they decided to invest it on RPAS enabling technologies, which this is obviously the benefit of. Just to touch on the ESG component. So consider this as a flying tripod. So any sensor you want to put in the air at scale, obviously there's a bit of an onion layer of different platforms or ways of acquiring data. We're in the middle ground. So there's ground-based technology, either a guy in a truck or sensors embedded, that kind of thing. Right now, there's mostly manned aviation, and then there's satellite. And we're in the middle, basically occupying or displacing some of the more traditional aviation stuff. What it allows you to do is get scale, so you can cover a large area, excuse me, very quickly. But whereas satellite is relatively low resolution, we're able to go below atmospheric distortion, so clouds, smoke, that kind of thing. And then we also have the ability to task, so the ability to go when required. There's kind of 2 structures. There's scheduled maintenance of data, so flying a site monthly or weekly, whatever's required. And then there's real-time response. So for forest fire or whatever you need to do, you got to task a drone, you get it at site. We've pulled some stats. So we're 22 times more carbon efficient per kilometer inspected than manned aviation. We don't have any stats yet for satellites, but obviously it takes a lot of fuel to get them up there. Once they're there for a while, but there's certainly a big upfront cost. We've been able to, especially during COVID, fly outside of the mine. So the range of the radar is so comprehensive that we can fly from before the security fence, which means less persons in the mine, less safety risk. The drone is more efficient, I'd say, than manned. So you're not flying with a big gas tank into a site. You're just putting the camera where it needs to be. So you're getting people out of the mine. We're also, for every one BV loss flight, you're roughly displacing 14 or more visual line of sight flights. That makes sense. There's a lot of MOB and DMOB associated with visual line of sights, and we've been able to reduce that with the scale. We are working with SATE, so they have a really good pilot and technician course. And then we also have about 12 software developers, most coming out of U of C, for the computer vision and the analytics. But as mentioned, it's just faster response times, able to get more data. I think as displayed, once you have the right kind of information, all the silos within the institution or the clients in different business units, they can all work on the same page. And so they get to a more efficient outcome faster. A lot of what's going on right now is just a guy with a Cessna 172 looking out the window. His wife's drawn up the reports, and then they hand it in. And it's not I would say, a permanent or comparable record. It's certainly not survey grade. So as mentioned, our technology has allowed us to get pretty substantial permits. So these are the biggest in Canada. So basically anywhere outside of a major airport, what you might not realize is there's kind of an upside down wedding cake of restricted airspace above cities and the major internationals. And anywhere outside of that, we're able to fly 8 nautical miles radius. So BV loss at scale. We're able to do that 800 feet across Canada. So height above ground affects economics. So the higher your platform, the bigger the field of view of the camera. And so the more efficient, you need less images, you get more area coverage. So we're really, focused on reducing cost of acquisition and an increasing value of the data. What we've been able to do too is, because it's with radar, it's what's basically called IFR, or instrument flight rating. So you can fly day or night, especially in winter in Canada. There's obviously a lot of, cold, dark days, and a lot of the helicopter alternatives can't fly in that. So you have basically emergency response gap of, 8 or more hours, depending on the time of year, whereas we're able to fly day or night, as well as many drones we need to per radar. So it's a lot more efficient, especially for a real-time response ConOp. So this is an example of what the scale is. So this is, a relatively dense pipeline network. We drive to a site with a truck and then deploy drones in whatever kind of fashion we need to. Each time we deploy, so each MOB and DMOB is covering roughly 650 square kilometers. So quite a bit of data, quite a bit of area coverage. This also obviously works for the mine sites. That'd be more of a fixed location, whereas the pipelines are either annual or monthly or biweekly. So you're talking about hundreds, if not thousands of kilometers per location. And getting digital survey grade real models of it. So not just a couple pictures. Like I've heard it as bad as 5 photos for 1,000 kilometers. You're getting a digital twin each time we fly, both infrared, visual, as well as multispectral. This works for 99% of the pipelines in Canada. We've developed basically what we call Tasker. So what we've seen is each project takes a lot of onboarding, so scoping out requirements, understanding the when, the what payload, the what kind of data, aviation is all about optimization of assets. So I got to make hay when the sun shines. I got to make, fly all the pipelines we can within, 5 months to a year. So utilization, our scheduling is key. And that's been a big cost driver for us. And so we basically built, with the funding from TechTerra, a platform that manages all that. So you know who's flying, when they're flying, customer inputs basically a polygon to say, I want this area with this kind of output. And then they can track that flight operation all the way through. It also allows us to manage our tickets, so all of our HS&E, all of our site training, all of our certificates, our maintenance is in the background, so the aircraft are maintained and have enough additional flight hours available for the mission. And then everyone has their medical and all that kind of stuff. So it tracks basically the full upstream pipeline from start to finish. So we're working on right now with the National Research Council is putting more and more of the data in the background. So managing the aspects of the data, getting lower resolution but sufficient data out really fast, and then getting the higher resolution, higher ground control points within 24 hours. So this is all about reducing the cost of the transaction, and so you get into higher flight volumes with a lower total cost. So for example, in a mine, you can have this set up, you'd have a monthly inspection, and then, hey, one of our guys wants to do a flare stack in the next 20 minutes, drop the pin task, it's flying out and getting that data. So it gives you that flexibility at site to really observe what's going on. This is more of that kind of upstream data acquisition work through. So from capture, so mission outline, planning, who, what, when, where, why, the execution, when it was done, all that metadata is embedded, so you can give that to your operator or your business unit so they can audit it, and then managing the data in the back end and having that available in different formats. We found that a lot of different clients, their IT systems, it's very difficult for them to turn on new GIS tools, and this is happening faster and at a bigger scale than a lot of what they're dealing with. So we manage that on our side, and then you can pull down what you need to when required. And then at the very end, again, that's that re-up. So this is a full kind of cycle. So you can reorder, I want this newer, I want this better, or in a different area with a different sensor, retask. So for example, we're able to do roughly 120 kilometers squared per day. And each pixel is 1.6 centimeters. So you're talking about billions of points. When we first did this several years ago, we broke Amazon. The joke was that we paid for enough fuel for 5 minutes for Bezos to get up to space, but we've been able to bring the analytics further upstream and deal with those kind of costs, but they're significant models. Especially the mine sites, they're so large that no one can wrap their heads around completely. And obviously, the cheapest current way to doing things is get a guy in the truck. But the guy in the truck is a risk. So put a drone in the air. Most, if not all, oil and gas companies are using this technology right now. They're just not using it efficiently. So I've heard, thousands of flights are happening per mine, and that's thousands of reductions of persons on the ground, but it's also 1,000 more flights in the air. So if you get a more comprehensive scope, you can again decrease that risk and cost. This is an example of some of the pipeline technology we're working on with our partner called Ventus Geospatial. Basically fusing electrical, optical, or visual cameras with infrared. We're doing this in the same sensor, so the same payload. So as they're flying, there's a downward-facing camera that's fusing both EO/IR real time, so you can see some subterranean aspects of the pipeline. We also have a forward-facing EO/IR camera to determine signage and other things like that. So pretty comprehensive data and very useful. We're trying to scale this up more and more, drive the costs down. We'll be able to get higher flights, bigger aircraft with more onboard processing, and then faster turnaround times. Now that we have Starlink, we can basically upload all this from the field and then and short circuit that even faster. So that's it.
Wow, Sean, lots have developed over the past few years from when we first met. That's fantastic. Those regulatory hurdles really has opened up things for you. I mean, overcoming those regulatory hurdles have really opened things up for you. I apologize for that. Next, I'd like to call up Paul Ritchie, who's going to share his industrial visualization monitoring as a key part of your ESG program. Welcome, Paul.
Well, carrying on Sean's theme of cameras, we will go to the fixed position cameras. So Asperity is an industrial visual monitoring company. So we are in the CV AI space as a platform technology. We're fairly hardware agnostic from the visual sensors, but as we go through here, you'll see we also bring in other data to truly visualize what's happening at a site. So we all know, and following Sean, he's already gone through many of these points. Visual is very intuitive, insightful, and contextual. So if you can get an alarm from a SCADA or process control system, it's going to tell you that X is happening, but it's not necessarily showing you what's happening. So part of what we do is work with that technology as well. And as you'll see as I go through here, we fuse a lot of different technologies into our platform to deliver a visualization of our industrial clients' assets. Oh, I'm the first one to break it. So as I mentioned, to meet the true goals that these companies are coming up to having to do, potentially, it's a combination of technologies that need to work together and come together to do it. We're one piece of that answer in the industrial world. And the interesting part with many of these technologies, there's a lot of operational cost savings and operational advantages that they gain from using them. So our look at ESG is all three letters and really producing an ROI and a positive outcome for the client through our systems and integration of our systems into other areas of their operations and their technology roadmap. So when you look at things where we fit in, we're obviously in all these spaces. We all know this. We hear it every day. We'll go to the next slide. No, we won't. What we add on there is actually a layer of that operational efficiencies as well. So as we go through some examples and get to an actual true client overview of what they accomplished in 2022 using our platform, you'll get a better understanding of how it comes together. So who are we and what do we do? So we are a cloud-based technology. We have a small edge compute that goes out with all of our systems. And what that does, that's our first layer of analysis. That's also an NVR or DVR as well. So they have the ability to go backwards over time and see exactly what's happened. So our conventional ways of transmitting our data to the cloud is after that first layer of analysis, and the platform is 60% certain that this is something the client wants to be alerted to, there's a series of images that are sent to the cloud for that deep dive CVAI coverage. Then the alert is sent out. So we're communicating over client network, fiber. LTE is our biggest way of communications. And our newest way of communications, which is taking our product much deeper into the woods, is Starlink. So we deliver these reports as the event occurs, between 30 and 180 seconds after, depending on the communications. But we're not just doing the AI alerting. We're also providing the access to live video and being able to see what's happening. We're also integrating with their process control and SCADA systems to say, X is happening at this geolocated sensor, and our cameras will go and actually take a video of that and send it to them simultaneously as the event's occurring. So in the past, the sensor went off, they called an operator that was close, or they got in their trucks and whipped out to the field. Dangerous, expensive, and full of carbon emissions. So we're taking it and having the right people go out from there, look at what is actually happening in the field. This is our fastest growing segment within existing and new clients is actually the remote inspections portion. So we set up daily, weekly, the client can set it up, various inspection points that delivers a completed visual inspection to them. In some states in the US, the energy regulatory boards are actually accepting them as regulatory inspections. And some boards have actually reached out to us because the definition of a visual inspection, if you ask the Alberta Energy Board, is somebody looking at it. But it's not showing what is occurring. So what we're doing is we're actually showing them in a large report in a matter of moments at their scheduled times what's happening. So in this case, this is one of our clients. It is a regulatory inspection. They submit to the Department of Energy in Minnesota, and it's required once a week. So there's 197 images that we compile from 6 different cameras that do cover 300,000 barrel tanks in the field. In the past, that was a 3 to 4 hour with drive time and inspection, job for an operator to drive to and submit. The other part we're doing is, as I mentioned, taking that data from other systems and actually saying, here's what that vibration sensor is showing. Here's what is happening at that leak sensor. And delivering that visually both in photographic and video if required by the client. We also get into the OGI space. So we do have a partner in Viper Imaging, which uses the Sensia cameras that we can deliver their data. So with many OGI cameras, the actual technology is on the camera. We've not gotten into OGI analysis because the cameras do it. You want to identify, you want to quantify, and you want to visualize. And that's what this system does. And we do have a few clients in the US that do use it. And it's extremely accurate and extremely reliable, which comes with an extremely big price tag. So when you look at what one of our clients in the US actually does with our platform across their operations and their ESG mandates, it's pretty amazing. In 2022 was our large rollout, was 2021, 2022. We continued to add locations as we do now with them. This is a major pipeline, goes from Corpus Christi all the way to Minnesota. Their operators gained on average 1.6 hours per day by not having to go out and remotely inspect and or getting a visualization of what a sensor is actually telling them it's doing. Reduced site visits by 42%, reduced carbon. Reduced operator vehicle fuel consumption, 40%, carbon reduction. Extended vehicle life, and they reduced something. Reduced insurance costs, sorry. They increased from 2021 to 2022. At that point, the inspections we were doing were 3 times a week. We're now doing at all their sites 14 times a week. So that's where they're gaining that massive increase. Response times to equipment, environmental, and safety events increased 45%. So their response increased to events occurring. Reduced downtime, reduced downtown. Oh, I should proofread. Reduced downtime by 26% on visually monitor assets. And they actually kept track of those that were and weren't visually monitored. And that downtime was by, the biggest one they said is having the ability to see what the problem is before somebody going out there and sending the proper contractor or employee out to fix the problem. The other part was the sensor went off. They saw that whatever it was that caused the sensor to go off had actually stopped producing that event. so they didn't have to act on it. So what do we provide to them? We provide everything we do. And that's the only client we have that we provide absolutely everything we do. All of these all these numbers that came from here came from their annual report. Some of I don't have the carbon numbers, they sent them to me. The report's not out yet. But for them, it was providing us having a product provide a service that visualized all their remote assets. And we're a part of that. And I say we're a part of it because they've got other sensors and other control systems out there that we're integrating two ways. We may be sending data to them and they may be sending data to us. So we provide our complete analytics package, our multitude of CV algorithms, from optical fire and smoke detection to determining whether it's a tanker or a pickup truck or a UTV that's on a site, how long things have been there and such. Thermal alerting. We don't provide OGI to them, but we use a lot of thermal measurements around their valves and pipelines. So just to look at where we cover in an enterprise and some simple examples. Don't need to go through them. We've sort of talked about them, but it's really about a product that we love to integrate with other systems and processes, and we appreciate having the ability to gain knowledge from other systems and processes to deliver the visual side of what's happening. And the biggest change I see, a lot of people say, what makes you different? And I think there's two things that really validated our technology in the last 3 years. One, COVID. We never slowed down during COVID in adding. We saw the level of user go from operators to directors to CEOs of energy and industrial companies. And what we're in right now in the forest fires in Alberta. We've been able to detect occurrences approaching sites that may or may not be shut in yet. We're also giving them a live view of what's happening at those locations. So we do have a lot of equipment, and unfortunately we have a lot of work to do when this is all done with lost equipment. It's been very devastating and as to what we've seen. We have a considerable footprint in the energy industry. We also have a decent footprint in the crypto mining and remote data processing industry from a thermal side, but also from the perspective of the flare gases that they're actually using to generate and power these technology pods they've got out there, working with them to ensure they're efficiently using them. And lastly, it's not just about fixed cameras. We're not flying in the air, but we can move our systems around in various different pieces. So in an overview, I mean, we are a fairly plug and play technology into industrial IP cameras in the field. We can design and provide the specs as to what you should do, or we can provide the whole package. We're about 50-50 in using existing or the client acquiring the hardware, and we simply provide our edge device and the connectivity if they don't have it. So, yeah. Thank you, anyone, and again, I'll be on the panel in here after for any questions.
I think I don't meet the height criteria. Yeah, maybe. I need to be on my tippy toes. Thank you very much, Paul. Lots of advances too from over the years from when we first met. This is fantastic. I look forward to the panel. So give us a couple minutes here while we set up for the panel. All right. Meantime, I hope you've been accumulating your questions. After the panel, we're going to open up the floor to allow folks to ask questions. And that's also online. If you want to submit your question, we'll have that answered. And if not, we'll make sure we have answers for you afterwards. All right, so I welcome up Carrie, Jeff, Paul, and Sean. Thank you. It's mic sharing time.
Yeah.
All right. Are we gonna have some feedback there?
No,
We're good?
I think it's okay.
Perfect. All right. So those were all fantastic conversations and presentations that we had. Lots of different things are moving in this industry. And so I want to cover off a couple of things that are probably valuable to the folks that are in the room. And so one of them, I think, from the business cases that you've shared so far, what was the one thing that helped you move the needle to where you're at now? Carrie, do you want to, okay, go ahead, Carrie. Let's start from the left.
Ladies first, okay. I think the one thing that allowed us to move the needle from where we are now, truthfully, is having the SMEs and the expertise in the industrial operation side, right? So being wholly owned by Spartan Controls has really allowed us to understand our customers' pain points quite deeply. And then partnering in with organizations like VisWorks to be able to visualize that data in a meaningful way. So I think those two pieces, the SMEs and being able to showcase the data in a way that's actually meaningful for the user, have been the two pieces that have moved us forward.
Thanks, Carrie. Jeff, do you?
Yeah, and to kind of follow up on that, one of the things we certainly learned over the years, particularly in this product co-development space, is that the domain expertise resides in the partners. They understand it, they live it, they breathe it, they understand what they're trying to accomplish with it, but they don't always have all the right resources to make that happen. And so to me, what's successful about relationships like this is that it is a true partnership. We are embedded in the team. We are part of the team. There is no differentiation. I think you made a commentary about a new hire that said, well, who is this person? Well, they don't actually work for us, but you would never know that unless you actually ask the question because they're embedded in the team. That's a partnership. We are there together on sharing the journey, and that to me is a measure of success, is where the differentiation between our team and their team is non-existent essentially. So we are there to share the journey together, and that's really, I think, how we are successful when we work together with groups like Blue Marble. So.
Well, honestly, money turns the needle. But, for us, it was really, this is really feeding back. Let's just do this. For us, it was clients that wanted to challenge us, is bring us their issues and their problems so we could help them identify and make their jobs more efficient, safer, and obviously more environmentally friendly. And to this point is having partners that helped us get there, whether it was financially or technology-wise. We have a full team of developers. We don't have one that does absolutely everything. And we do use outside sources to come together with meeting those clients' goals.
Yeah, I agree with all those. I'd add, for us anyway, it was a regulatory stimulus. Like, there's financial stimulus, but the ability to actually speak with the regulator, get access. In 2016, parliamentary budget approval spooled up a 40-person RPAS task force, and we were able to pull in not only the technology but the clients. We did the first, some of the largest beef loss operations up in Christina Lake, and really bring them into the field, and then they see how, this isn't downtown Toronto. This is not the risk that we were wrapping our arms around. It's something else, and there's a lot of economic value. So obviously funding clients and then the regulator.
Great, thank you. Keep the mic there, Sean. So let's explore the customer pain points a little bit further. So that's something that we talk about quite a bit as part of our Corinne Digital Oil and Gas theme, is trying to understand what those customer pain points are and what those challenges are. And so some of the issues we've come across as a team is trying to get the data and having the community actually share the data so that innovators and problem solvers like yourselves can actually attack them, so to speak. Have you come across that as well? You're the one that's gathering the data, but
Yeah, I think it's buy-in. We've seen, like, every business unit is expected to come up with its own innovation, whereas there's a lot of innovations that are scalable between all business units. And then so what ends up happening is there's a whole game of internalization. So they'll get their own drone program and all that kind of stuff, which scratches the itch and produces some value, but it doesn't get to what the end state is, which is the scale that we're talking about. So trying to give them wins and showing them kind of the light towards how to actually use the technology, but doing it in such a way that they don't have to reinvent the wheel themselves.
Okay, great.
Yeah, I think we're exactly the same as it's internally within customers, we have multiple customers, and they don't all want to work together. Because they have this, they don't realize that we can deliver just that data to your department and just this data to that department. Nobody else will see it amongst those departments. But to Sean's point, they all go in different directions. And when you see a massive consolidation continuously happening in the technology world, hey, guess what? We got it. You got to come together and create a great company as opposed to 50 individual companies within a corporation. And for us, that's our biggest challenge, is bringing those different areas together and truly experiencing the cost-benefit analysis of an enterprise product.
My microphone off. So because of the nature of what we do, we deal with organizations everywhere from startup to government. And the dynamics of the pain points in those organizations obviously differ dramatically. So in an earlier stage company, a lot of it is around building that rapport, that cultural connectedness, the ability to work tightly together as a team and identify the pain points. I'm getting a little feedback there. Identify the pain points that are jointly solvable by us as an organization. And it changes over time. So, and Carrie alluded to this, is that initially, there are resources that we can drop in that support at the earlier stage, but as the company progresses and matures as a small business, some of those initial resources now are going to be actually resources that are owned by the actual company that we're working with in a partnership. Whereas there'll be other resources that become valuable in the future. So the nature of the partnership evolves over time, and that's also part of working with a small business, is recognizing that that is going to be a change in relationship. It is going to evolve over time in terms of where those go. Now, we deal with the government. The government is a completely different issue with regards to the way that they work and the way they engage. We deal with large organizations. Often we run into large organizations where they don't even know what their pain points are. And if they do, they're not willing to talk about them. And that's another issue, because there's so many different groups within organizations that each may have a tiny little piece of that problem, that pain point, that sometimes as an external entity, we can actually see it better than they can, because we're connected with those different groups within the organization. But being able to pull that together and provide them with that understanding can sometimes be the challenge, because they're in many cases averse to disclosing that they have these challenges in the first place. So part of the pain point we deal with is just literally that risk aversion from a lot of larger organizations, where they don't want to talk about their pain points. They don't want to admit that there are pain points. They're concerned about the public perception of pain points. So how do we work with them in a way that that trust is maintained, that they know we're not going to disclose those things. We're not going to put that out in the public. We're going to help you resolve it in a way that actually helps you as an organization without it becoming an issue in your public perception of who you are as an organization. So it's really that trust building, and how do you build that level of trust is critical. So.
Yeah, I mean, building on what others have said already, I think, one of the big pain points that we see with our customers is who has the budget. Is it the operation in the field? Is it the facility? Or is it head office IT? And so, what was already spoken to, right? Like we often struggle with where we actually need to make that sale and make that connection in with the customer. And sometimes we find that at the facility level, we're able to kind of get in, we're able to demonstrate value, and then we move enterprise wide from there. Other times, depending on the culture of the organization, it's top down. And so it's actually coming from like a corporate IT group or a group that owns like the digital transformation budget, and they're pushing it down to the facility level. But it really depends on the culture of the organization and who you're working with. And so I think that convergence of OT, IT,
still hasn't quite meshed together, if you will. And so I think we see a lot of pain points internally with our customers there.
Oh, you're all nodding your head about IT and OT. And so how do you converge those two teams together to actually understand that value and the cost to offset, and to provide that contextual information that they need?
Oh, if I had the answer to that, I would be a very wealthy woman.
No,
You know?
I don't know.
I don't know.
Okay.
I think it's tough.
No.
Yeah.
It's a rhetorical question then?
Yeah. Yeah.
The IT and OT departments, particularly in the energy department, from one company to the next, don't perform the same tasks. And I think that's probably the biggest challenge out there. And I will tell you, as generally in operational technology, and we deal with all levels within a company, the biggest thing they say to us, we love your product if you can stay out of IT. Do not, oh, you can do LTE? Perfect. Stay out of our network, stay out of our systems, we'll buy. That's the OT team talking about the IT team. So, you know, there's definite challenges that we're not going to solve. But I think the industry as a whole, not just the energy industry, if they better define what those are, and we're in other industries and it's no different, in many cases we found that both are going off on the same path. In one case we had 2 sales individuals in the US dealing with the same company on the same project from an IT perspective and an OT perspective, until they got on a weekly sales meeting and said, this is what we're doing. And they're like, oh, we're dealing with the same company. So in that case, we're able to bring them together, but I don't have a solution. Sean, do you?
Yeah, I'll just, it is difficult. Like, what we've experienced, so we did one project where there's broken secondary extraction plants. We put a cage drone in that, and it's elder dangerous, right? And so we'll get in there before a human gets in there and get imagery and then share it throughout the entire business unit. And at the end of the day, we did that in about 10 minutes. And they said our only alternative was a month of building scaffold throughout and $1 million of scaffold to do that. So the turnaround time is huge. But I think it's a matter of metrics. I think that's being tracked. At the end of the day, they're still seeing a purchase order go out. It's a way smaller purchase order, but it's not clear how much smaller that purchase order is. So I think that's the issue. It's clear that the guys on the ground know what's going on. It's difficult to kind of translate that all the way up through the stack.
So I'm going to approach this from a somewhat different direction. If you think about this from the perspective of risk, and particularly from cyber risk perspective, OT and IT actually have very different risk matrices. The OT side of it is actually physically impactful. So if you have a cyber incident on an OT side of the world, it can directly impact physical operations. It can cause explosions in the extreme, loss of life. All these things are possible if you actually have a cyber incident on the OT side of the world. On the IT side of the world, it can cause financial issues, it can cause operational issues, but it doesn't impact physical operational parameters. So the cyber incident may seem more important on the IT side of the world from the perspective that it's, kind of affects the operations of a company, but it doesn't have that massive potential impact environmentally, physically, loss of life issues and so forth. And so there is actually some very different dynamics when it comes to cybersecurity between OT and IT that really are not often talked about within this kind of environment. And so when you talk about bridging the gap between IT and OT, IT is really more exposed to cyber these days. From the perspective of it is connected to the internet, the potential for somebody to get caught in a phishing attack or something like that and expose the internal network of their company is higher for the IT side of it than the OT side of it. But as we get more and more into this connectivity, we want to have access and knowledge of what's going on in the OT world. We have the risk of exposing that OT world to the cybersecurity things that the IT world is exposed to. And so that bridge, so that question around how you actually cross that bridge has to come from the perspective of understanding the risks that you're inherently from a cyber perspective as well.
And so you're seeing systems out there that are air gapping IT and OT, where you can get OT replicated on the IT side, but none of the information from IT goes back to the OT side, as an example. So you essentially create a one-way pass so that there's no possibility of cyber going into the OT side of things from the IT world. These are the ways you need to bridge the gap between them, because otherwise you expose an entire physical network to potential cyber attacks. And so you need to be very careful about that. So that's when I look at it from that perspective. I mean, I can't remember which group I was talking to. They were saying there was 7 firewalls between OT and IT that they had to bridge to actually get data between the two of them. Don't do it. Don't bridge that, is really what it comes down to. We need to think about different ways of engaging OT and IT that don't expose us to cybersecurity issues on the OT side of things. Otherwise, we put our entire infrastructure at risk as a result of that.
That was a really great answer. I think it's something that's still being explored, and I know our legal teams are, and different corporations are reviewing it as well. So that's another entity that's involved in that whole discussion.
Yeah.
So from a safety perspective, you talked about security and cybersecurity. I want to understand more around the value that your solutions bring as far as that is concerned for the corporations. Who's got? Do you still have the mic, Jeff?
I still have it.
Okay. Do you want to start with that?
Sure. Effectively, because although I'd say we have custom solutions, we have products, and we have product co-development. So because we are inherently able to build things to match the needs of an organization, the exact needs of an organization, we can build anything to match those needs. So we can address these kind of challenges by building something very specific for those needs. That's more challenging when you're dealing with off-the-shelf solutions, which, unless they've already been designed with that concept in mind, it can be quite difficult to actually adjust them to meet the needs of the organization. So from our perspective, in the world that we live in, it's actually fairly easy to address these things because we build it to specifically meet those conditions. And we often are caught in a situation where we're doing integrations between systems, and we have to maintain the cybersecurity between that integration. Again, we can build it to support those needs. So we're not constrained, so to speak, by the limitations of these systems. We work around those, and we build things that are actually addressing those. I'll give you an example of one of the ones we're working on right now. So if you deal with any classical control room, one of the classical control room limitations is it's a physical space. You have a very large screen, you have a whole bunch of consoles, typically with multiple monitors on each one of the consoles. It's a physical location, and as mentioned, COVID actually threw an interesting wrench into the works when we think about that, because a single person within that control room getting COVID meant the entire team had to go into isolation. And guess what? There's not a whole lot of control room operators, so that meant that they put the operation itself at risk by having to isolate a team. So we've been working on systems that are next generation control rooms that are virtuality based control rooms. So now you can actually be in that virtuality control room from anywhere in the world, as long as you're doing it through a secured internet access point. This now changes the dynamic of how people can engage with data, how can access data, and enables a different way of understanding that a classical physical control room doesn't. And so going beyond the limitations of the way we classically do things and looking at how we can apply these advanced technologies to go beyond those limitations is the kind of things that we do that address those kind of questions that Nan raised. So.
Yeah, safety. It's everything that it's our primary value proposition. It's these most of the oil and gas companies, like they're really banks with engineers that interpret data, and then the assets are so large. What's going on above ground, below ground? It's about quality and quantity of that data. So for us, it's can we get better, more and more often, or higher, more iterations of the data with less exposure of humans in all weather conditions, day or night. And that's simply what we can do, just with given the scale and that kind of thing. So it's a pretty easy safety case for us. It's just a matter of translating that all the way up. I mean, even managing wildlife. There's companies that offer bird drones that attack or get birds off the ponds, stealing spawns. Obviously, we can track bear activity, that kind of thing. So it's just wrapping your head around the scale of the assets and then applying the right kind of platform and solution to it in order to ensure that people don't get exposed.
And similarly, we're helping keep the whole environment of these workspaces safe, whether it's through detection of things like bears, or people getting into hazardous zones. We do a lot of zone analysis around the downstream space and the midstream space in risers and terminals. And in the frac space, there's about 15 hazardous zones in a frac. And our cameras can visually see where these people are and actually sound an audible alarm, as well as send an alert to whoever needs to know about it or multiple people that need to know about it. So safety is a big part of what we do. From a data security standpoint, which is very important. For those of you who've ever tried to complete the data security things for Shell and Chevron and all those, we pass. But we are cloud-based technology. We have our instance in AWS. Within that, every single client's data is secluded in their own instance within ours. And they actually, if they want, can have direct control of that data and remove it as they desire. They own it. We simply process and store it. So.
Thank you. Well, we've covered off costs. We've talked about the safety. Sorry. Did you want to add to it? Keep going. No. Go ahead, Carrie. My apologies.
No, you're fine. I passed, and then I decided I wanted to jump in.
Well, jump in.
You know, I mean, on the safety side for us, we didn't showcase some of the other products that we have, but some of the other Blue Marvel applications that we build are focused on bypass as well as alarm and event. And so helping operators and helping organizations monitor those components, right? And so if something is in bypass for too long or shouldn't be left in bypass, it's important that we understand that and why that might be in place, right? And so our applications are also helping provide that visibility to somebody at the site level, but also enterprise-wide. So that we're able to kind of monitor that and visualize what's going on there. So, yeah.
That's great. And all three of you talked about how you capture the data, you quantify and visualize, especially around emission reduction, environmental footprint. How do you use that to help build your business case?
Well, I mean, I think for us on the energy management side, like we're helping organizations understand what their energy generation and consumption looks like, right? And so where we're really focused is helping them optimize that and ensuring that they are reducing energy usage. And so that's really what our business case is all about, is that reduction and optimization on the energy side.
Right, so 5 to 8%, is that compelling enough for these companies to move forward?
I mean, I think so. Like when you're talking in, hundreds of millions of dollars, 5 to 8% isn't insignificant when you're looking at even sometimes one section of a site.
Right,
So,
thank you.
yeah.
And Paul, you mentioned, 1.6 hours per day, 42% reduction in site visits, 40% reduction in fuel consumption, and 26% reduction in downtime. Yes, I was paying attention. So, is that enough to actually compel someone to actually join your program and build a full enterprise system?
It is, and there's a lot of intangibles that go behind that as well. From a safety perspective, from an operational expense perspective. So when you look at the pure, let's keep in mind, those are their company's estimates. Not all of them are carbon creditable, but they sure as heck are going in their annual report because they're taking those steps forward. And it is enough to move the needle. So they are our second largest client in North America, and they're growing at a rate of 100% installations over the last 3 years. So it's moving the needle largely for them.
Okay, great, thank you. And I have a different question for you, Sean.
Okay.
So I learned that doodads is a technical term. So that's pretty cool. So now I will use doodads from going forward. But so you talked about a couple things, and that your technology is like mid-tier level. So you've got embedded sensors, which Asperity is, and then you've got the manned flight ones. But you're in between. So how does someone choose your technology over the others? Right? Is the accuracy of the information you pull affect what customers end up deciding to do?
I think it's several factors. So it's what kind of information you want. So whether you want oblique imagery, I think, which Asperity is like obviously king at. Also, is it a fixed asset? Is it an annual inspection? Is the mine moving? For example, like if the mine keeps moving throughout, does it make sense to have a fixed installation there versus one that flies over site? So it's that tailoring, application versus area coverage versus longevity and acquisition. I was just thinking too about the other question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Whenever we get in front of the aviation department, they're like, okay, this is as good or better than any other manned aviation contractors we have. So our risk, but also the risk of the platform comes down. And then you get into applications such as like we're looking at, having a drone basically inspect the mine face of an oil sands site and having that information being inputted into secondary extraction, so you can actually tailor, heat, pressure, water before the material comes. But then that's aviation, mining, and then post-secondary extraction. Those are three different business units I got to deal with, and who gets the benefit. So there's all these. Again, it's the game of inches, but when you have it in every single department, it all stacks up.
Great, thank you. I'm going to talk about disruption. So, there's lots of changes. The latest one that I've been sort of following, and now both Carrie and I call them our interns, and that's ChatGPT. So let's take a look at those kind of new upcoming technologies and how you think that may affect the work you're doing now. You said to ask anything.
Yeah, you did. Yes, and we do joke that where are you at with that document? It's with the intern. It's with ChatGPT. I think, right? Like, you're right. Like those large language models. I think of, like, for me, where my head goes is customer success. And we're still quite early stage, but I think, the application of a large language model, if trained properly, could be kind of that first line of communication to our customer when they have an issue, right? So, it's answering a common question that a customer might have. So that's where I kind of see that application maybe being applied to us in the future.
So since we live in this world around disrupting organizations, we see ChatGPT and these other kind of tools as part of the toolbox. To me, they are no different in many ways than all the other tools that we deal with. They're just applied in different ways. And so what I find ironic is that this is not a new thing, and we all know this if you kind of look back in history long enough, is that this kind of disruption from a technology is something that happens again and again throughout history. This is just the latest disruption that's occurring, and it's kind of caught a lot of public attention, so it's kind of the disruption du jour, so to speak, these days. But the reality is this is part of the world. We continually have these disruptions. We continually have evolution of the technology platforms, and so to me, it's not a matter of what it's disrupting, but how can we best leverage it as a personal assistant to do things, as an intern, as a way of generating imagery. These organizations that classically have these repositories of captured film pictures, they're massively disrupted by this. There's a generative AI now that can generate images that are tailored to exactly what you want. I want that person on a beach with a blue swimsuit and an ice cream in their hand that's strawberry. You can do that and it'll generate that picture for you. There's no way you're going to be able to do that by looking through a catalog of photos. And so this ability to really generate a new way of engaging is something that this kind of tool set provides to us. And the number of ways it's going to impact our world is indeterminate at this point, but it's going to be significant. But that's normal. That is the normal nature of this kind of technologies, is that they do this, they disrupt it. And the people who embrace it and look at it from the perspective of what can I do with this versus how is this going to impact me in a negative way are the ones that are going to be successful. There was and of course it's not a new way of looking at it, but this idea that, ChatGPT is not going to eliminate your job. The people who learn how to use ChatGPT are, though. And so it's this idea of if you embrace the technology, you will be the people that are leading the future of this. Whereas if you are resistant to it and you try to avoid it, then yes, you are going to be disrupted. And yes, you're going to be considered to be the old school, and your ability to move forward with that approach is going to be limited. So embrace these technologies, embrace the opportunities that these represent, and really kind of look at what you can do with it, what this opens up in new things versus what it's preventing you from doing. Because ultimately it's not preventing you from doing anything, it's just opening up new avenues.
I'll just be quick. I think what it does to those, and I know we deal with a lot of operators in the field. We deal with a lot of, I don't know what you want to call it, lower technology knowledge base. AI scares the crap out of them. The fact that they're being watched on video intimidates them. Now they're going, oh, wow, this is really cool. Have you tried that ChatGPT? What? Well, it's AI. I think it's a validation to the companies up here that we've been doing this for a long time and trying to push it through. You've opened the eyes to the common person. I mean, my 80-year-old mother who can barely use her iPhone wants to understand what it is. It's because it's in their face. It's AI. Again, to Jeff's point, it's another tool in the toolbox. For our company, that's the way we're approaching it. And if you ever have an issue with FedEx, my friend got the best letter to complain about FedEx off of ChatGPT. You couldn't have written a better one.
Yeah, I'd say it's really great at generating fiction. So, instead of Getty Images, you can get, whatever you want tailored. But we create nonfiction, so like real imagery of real assets in remote locations. And I think there's always, what this can generate again is mostly answers. So in the large language models, you can get answers from huge data sets. They're not very specific necessarily, but someone has to ask them the question. And I think that's the role of the human, is what is the question that needs to be solved today? And so it's a tool, but it's not the question.
Cool. One of the things we're also talking about at the Crin Digital team is quantum and the change that we'll see in the next 5 years. So this one is disruption that we're expecting. So let's talk about what's happening for you in the next 5 years, and what you see the industry's going to develop, or how industry's developing, and how you are going to develop as a company to meet those needs in the next 5 years. And then I'll ask the 10-year one.
So for us, it's going to be this kind of hybrid of commercial and military applications. I don't think it's a surprise Canada's behind defensively, so we're seeing a lot of procurement for our RPAS, and that's going to establish us as a proper aerospace firm. But it'll also, frankly, give us quite a bit more R&D money to reinvest and find new applications in the commercial space. Eventually, we're going to go on board detect and avoid. So instead of having to send crews out, it just gets tasked from Calgary or wherever. That's not here today, but it's something we're going to basically, we're iterating on the ground so that we can make it efficient to put it in the air over time with the regulator. So those are the big trends. And it's the hard part to articulate for us is most of our competitors are very focused on the data analytics side. But the only way that makes sense is if you have the volume, and the only way to get the volume of the data is through the permit. So we went permit to volume to data. And I think once we're able to large scale, get it up to site and deploy for on recurring flight operations, there's so much fruit on the tree of what's going on that just can't be interpreted or observed, or it's siloed right now. And so I think when that gets synthesized through that flight volume, it'll be pretty substantial.
Yeah, for us, the next 5 years is focused on pushing all our analysis to the edge, reducing cost in data transmission, keeping in mind that most people think we would transmit thousands and thousands of images. average camera on our system is about 1.5 gig a month, which with our pooled data is not that much data or that much cost, but quicker processing to quicker alerting. So take that sort of under 60 seconds across the board to alert. It is developing a greater model library throughout other industrial spaces. We grew up in energy. We've expanded to construction. We've expanded to government infrastructure. We've expanded into why do you do crypto mining? But we don't do crypto mining. We monitor their containers at the edge. And it's really, the next 2 years for us is really understanding what next our clients or our future clients want to be able to know visually. And how do we deliver value from other data they collect visually? And that's been our big focus the last 2 years with sensor alerts and inspections.
For us, this is the world we live in. From the perspective that, take augmented reality, virtual reality. 10 years ago, you really didn't talk about it. You didn't talk about it in the industrial context. You didn't talk about it in the commercial context. If you talked about it at all, you talked about it in an entertainment focus. Today, virtual reality and training are intertwined. The ability to use virtual reality as a tool for training is giving a retention rate that, a classic classroom retention rate is maybe 20% if you're really good at it. Augmented reality or virtual reality based training can get you into the 70 to 75% retention rates. That ability to completely change the dynamic of training and engagement and retention means that virtual reality is now something that is being sourced across the world for training purposes. From a technology that 10 years ago wasn't even on the radar of people's interests. So as a technology-centric company, the idea that 5 years from now what's going to be happening, we're actually not sure. Quantum's an interesting one. What's the impact of quantum communications, quantum security, crypto, the whole idea of crypto in terms of a monetary base and how that's going to come around, how it's going to evolve over time, cybersecurity more broadly in terms of what's going to happen. I do think that cyber, and coming back to our earlier conversations about OT/IT, cyber is an underrepresented piece of the puzzle right now. We are lucky in North America, and particularly in Alberta, that we haven't had a major cyber incident here, but that's not going to continue to be the case. And so we really, really, really need to focus on how we get better at cyber and how we deal with cybersecurity going forward. Because the way the global world is changing around this is dramatic. And the ability for somebody in some other country, some other place of the world to dramatically impact our infrastructure here in Alberta exists today, and we're not really dealing with it very well. So I do see cyber as being a major role as we continue to go forward and how we deal with cybersecurity things going forward. I do see embracement of ChatGPT and all these kind of technologies as part of it. And I do see, broadly speaking, that the nature of these technologies and the evolution of technologies is something that we as an organization have to continue to be part of. And that's where we can work with groups like Blue Marvel as an example, by being that technology company and having that deep expertise in a variety of different domains that are applied to a variety of different projects, so that any individual organization doesn't have to have the breadth that we have to do the kind of things we do, but we can supply and support them in their paths and their journey as they move forward. So that's what I see for us, is to continue embracing and continue evolving with these technologies as they become mature.
Yeah, I mean, I think for us, we're only 2.5 years old. So where are we going to be in 5 years? I mean, gosh, we've developed 5 products in the time that we've had. You saw one of the demos today. Like, I think where we're going to be in 5 years is, I hope that we'll be core to a lot of these complex process organizations. And the more that we see investment in digital transformation and developing that data foundation layer, it's just going to make it easier for us to be able to deploy our applications for those organizations. And so I think that OT/IT convergence, as you know, none of us really know how to solve it. They're solving it. And as that starts to come together, Blue Marvel applications, I think, will be really core to how these organizations visualize what they do. Yeah.
Thank you. Now, we've come to time to open up the floor for questions. Are there any questions online or from the floor?
Yes, I'm just wondering how you and Carrie got together from a partnership perspective. How did you guys meet each other? Was it as part of a network, or how did that happen?
Can I just repeat that question because the online people?
Sure,
probably-
yeah. So the question essentially was that how did Blue Marvel and VisWorks, or Carrie and I, ultimately connect and work together on this thing? And so the longer story is that Spartan Controls, which at this point in time is the full owner of Blue Marvel, we've been engaged with Spartan Controls for a very long time. In conversations of a whole variety of things that we can do jointly together. We share a lot of similar cultural paradigms. We share a lot of similar ideas around where the technology path goes forward. And so we had discussions from VisWorks with Spartan Controls around how we build a partnership with Spartan Controls. Parallel to that, Blue Marvel was being born as a joint venture between Spartan and AltaML. And so in that journey of building that new venture, the original person who was the president of Blue Marvel was somebody I also knew from the past. So it's connectivity of people that ultimately came to this partnership. So see, we're talking with Spartan, we're starting with Blue Marvel. We ultimately ended up in a partnership arrangement between all three organizations that ultimately became what it is now. And then when Spartan took over all of Blue Marvel, that partnership became even more embedded. So it's kind of a long journey through multiple connections, multiple people, and a synergy of attitude and understanding and cultural fit, essentially.
And that's what CRIN's all about, is the network of networks.
The network of networks, that's
Exactly.
right. Yep.
Good question.
There was somebody else that had a question. No?
Silence.
I have to come up with another question.
No.
Anything online? Nothing. Okay. Well, let me ask one last question of the team. So why should these folks in the audience come and talk to you afterwards? Because we're here till 11:45, not on stage till 11:45. We'll close off by 11:15. But, you know, we're free to engage in conversation afterwards, one-on-one. So why should these folks come talk to you after? Who's got the mic? Is that you, Carrie?
I guess so, yeah. I mean, I would love to talk to folks about what problems you're trying to solve at your organization and where potentially our applications would be a fit. I think, you know, for us, really understanding who you are, what problems you're trying to solve is really what's going to drive our product roadmap in the future. And so we're not beholden to anything at this point. And so where we see that pull in the marketplace is where we'll take our products next. So come talk to me about what problems you're trying to solve.
And us too. So yeah, from my perspective, we're in the business of helping people be successful. And so if you're running into things where you're having challenges, pains of various sorts, that's what we do. We help organizations. We work closely with a variety of partner organizations and client organizations to help solve these tough problems. So from my perspective, if you're interested in, you know, us kind of talking with you and figuring out how we can help solve those problems, wonderful. Happy to have that conversation. I'm also a big supporter of the community. I've been part of CRIN for a very long time as well previously. And a number of different community organizations that I'm part of. So generally speaking, I want to support the community and help move this whole industry forward. So even if it's not specifically about VisWorks, if there's things that I can do through my network that can help and, you know, improve the overall community, happy to be able to have that conversation with people. So.
Likewise, meeting new people, understanding problems, always looking for partners on both sides of the fence as clients and as technology partners, and we've worked with multiple companies together. Emerson Zeta is a good example of that, where we work together and integrating into their SCADA and process control systems. So always looking for partners.
For us, it's I think the time is now. So it's not, you're not waiting to, you know, get through some bleeding edge technology to eventually get some Nirvana permit. We have it, it's ready to go. So you can get a big win without having to do all that kind of front end work. We now have the biggest permit on the planet in terms of area coverage. So it's ready to go. You want to do it tomorrow, we can do it.
Fantastic. So plans to move internationally too then, Sean?
We have just initiated conversations with the FAA. What's nice is Canada's a founding ICAO member, so we can take all of our data from 5 years of testing with the National Research Council in transport, and that's equivalent down there. So we started initiating that.
Fantastic.
That's the other thing I was going to mention too is that there's going to be parity of those permits across the border, and then with the master service agreements and how you've already been audited by the aviation departments, it can go to the States pretty easy.
Yeah, that's great. It sounds like we have a question online. Oh. No.
Can you repeat it if I had
Sure, I'll repeat it.
So online, we're wondering what challenges come from more data standards?
Okay, so the question is, what challenges come up with more data standards? Poor? Oh, poor data standards.
So for us, it's just the inability to be used throughout the organization. So, let's say one business unit wants to capture or do a survey, but they don't have the right resolution or ground control points. Another business unit can't necessarily use it because they need a higher fidelity or that kind of thing. So that's, again, having uniform standards throughout, I think allows you to capture once, benefit all.
For us, it's poor and inaccurate results. Bad image, bad result.
I'll be a little controversial on this one. One of the challenges, because we live in this disruptive world, is that we're often at a point where the standards are not in existence yet. And so that's opportunity, but it's also challenge at the same time. The opportunity side of it is that people can do things that they've never been able to do before, and the standards don't exist to restrain them in terms of what they can or can't do with it. So there are actually opportunities in a lack of standardization because we're in the business of trying to do things that are disrupting, and disrupting means you're not following necessarily a standard. So I see the opportunity there, but I also agree is that at some point there needs to be standards. There needs to be a common understanding of how things are done. And that maturing of the technology space is something that we see over time. But being part of that journey, being part of actually building those standards effectively is really important. And building it based upon real world experiences of this worked and that didn't really work so well. That's where real standards should come from, is actually real world experience of what is effective and what's not. So we're part of this disruption. So standards are good and bad in that sense of disruption.
Yeah, I mean, I have nothing else really to add. It's tough. If poor data is coming in, then poor quality reporting comes out.
So does poor data also mean too much data? Oh, we've got another question in the audience, but let's ask that question first. Does too much data mean equal to poor data?
I don't think so. I mean, I don't think you can ever have too much data. We will always take more data, but I agree with what's been said here. It's the standardization and the governance around it that's really important, so that you're able to actually do something useful with it. And it goes back to the problem that you're trying to solve, right? So if you're collecting data, but you're not really clear on what problem you're trying to solve with the data, it's not particularly useful.
Okay, we've got a question from the back.
I'll just answer one little tip around that one is that this is actually an endemic issue in industry writ broad, every industry. We have too much data. And we have too much data from the perspective that historically we had a really difficult time capturing data. And so we started putting in more and more systems to capture that data. So now we can capture just about anything you can imagine, but now it's noise. And data without actually turning it into knowledge, wisdom, and action is useless. So that ability to transform that data into information through collection, through analysis, through data cleanup, all those kind of processes of turning information is just the first stage. Our ability to turn that information into knowledge, wisdom, and ultimately into action is really where we need to get to. So too much data is a problem and can be a massive problem if you don't have that transformational process in mind around how you're going to take that noise and turn it into meaning so you can make action around it.
Okay, go
Hi,
ahead, Ian.
Got a question. Just going to take it in a slightly different direction, folks, around intellectual property. I know when we were looking at these projects before that protecting IP for code also means patents, or does it mean copyright, or is it trade secrets? So thoughts on the industry moving forward. I know people still want to monetize their inventions and then to innovation. Thoughts around IP strategy in the digital space.
Generally speaking, in the software world, patents are not worth the process of actually going through it because they are very difficult to get and almost impossible to defend. So they're good from an investor portfolio perspective, but from a practical commercial company perspective, they're pretty much a waste of time and money from my perspective. You're better off keeping it as a trade secret and not letting anybody what your secret sauce is, rather than trying to patent it and everybody knows about it, and then they can easily do a slight tweak to it and work around it. So I've not seen, at least in the software world, where patents have provided a huge amount of value. The exception potentially is where those software and hardware meet, because when you get into that software-hardware combination, that's where patenting can actually be fairly strong. But if you're dealing with classical software, cloud-based software, mobile apps, all those kind of things, patenting, generally speaking, is not worth the effort. And more and more things are getting into the open source world, and there's huge value in being able to open source things and move that forward. All the government work we're doing right now, actually, with the Canada Energy Regulator, all of that is open source. The data, the software code, all of it is open source, and that's the focus of what they want on there. They require it. It is actually a requirement of that. It's not only open source, but maybe this is kind of a deviation in this, but it's also fully accessible. And the idea of accessibility is something that we didn't really touch upon here, but when you think about software and the audience for which that software is intended, you also have to consider the accessibility question that goes along with it. In the government's case, they require it to be accessible for people who are in different languages, of course, French and English in Canada, but also people who may have visual impairments or have physical impairments. They still need to be able to access this data because it's public engagement data. So we have to think about all those kind of things from an accessibility perspective as well.
So we have 5 minutes, and I see 2 more questions left. So I think Glenn has the microphone right now.
Yeah, thanks. So you guys talked a little bit about sort of the future, next 5 years, and you touched on some current things that may have impact, like ChatGPT. I'm curious to get your thoughts around sort of the AI coding world, and it kind of links back into ChatGPT a little bit, but the question is really around where do you see the impact of AI coding, code that codes itself, on your business or on the business in general?
It's still immature, but I would say that the impact is going to be significant over time as it becomes more mature. The ability to create higher level, higher value software solutions through ChatGPT-based coding, I think, will eventually become valuable. But it comes back to something Sean said earlier, is that there's still a human in the loop. Why are you doing this? And being able to ask the right questions to enable the software to generate the right software that enables you to solve the challenge, it still has a human in the loop there. And so, like anything else, these are tools. And so to me, it's just enabling us to develop software at a more rapid pace to be able to solve problems faster, but it doesn't eliminate the need to have somebody with that intelligence to actually drive the decision around what are we going to do in the first place. So to me, it's just another tool in the toolbox at that point. Yeah.
Thank you. One last question.
So are you seeing any push towards, so this is a question towards Jeff and Kerry, are you seeing any push towards federated data and federated data models? I do see some activity in this in the Houston market, where the University of Houston is kind of taking that lead. Are you seeing that in the Calgary or the Canadian market?
Federated data model?
Maybe explain a little more detail what you're meaning by a federated data model.
So an example, right? So say there's one asset owner who's got 1,000 pumps, and another asset owner who's got 2 pumps. Okay, so now how do you kind of, both are interrelated, say, they are upstream, downstream of each other, they have shared fate. Okay, how do you now put the same kind of, predictive models on and build those models where one asset owner has 2 pumps, he may not have enough data, whereas the other guy has 1,000 enough data, but they have shared fate.
At different companies too.
Yeah, different companies. So I'll refocus that question slightly around this, is that when you're dealing with these data models, particularly around AI-based data models, the value of your model is based upon the volume of the data that you're using to train the AI models on these things. So if you have a system with 1,000 different sources of data, that can generate a huge amount more value in terms of your training of the model than 2. In terms of its capability. One of the ways it's being addressed in kind of the world of training is actually using AI to generate data to train the AI, so to speak. And so you're actually trying to get away from the need for a federated data model by actually using AI to create simulated versions of the data that can allow you to train the AI models. But the challenge in this scenario that you're talking about there is that what I learned from this one, can I apply it to the other? And that's a question that often doesn't work well because organizations want retention over their data. And they view the training models themselves as their ownership piece. And so it's a struggle. It's a struggle for most organizations and most suppliers to those organizations to try and deal with this question, because I know you're talking about you're keeping every data separate from all these different groups. But on the other hand, you still need to be able to train your models to be more effective at analyzing that data at the same time. So.
It's going to add actually from the way we work in that sense is we own none of the data we collect. Client owns the data. In our end user license agreement, we request that we can cross-train autonomously all of our models across. So a site in Norman Wells is getting trained by a site in South Texas. So you're building a stronger model, right, throughout with the different environments, and that is 4 times a year. If they want to take that data, and we have many clients that take their data off it and create their own visual CV to actually put back on our system just for them. So, you know, a little different than, you know, you can look at an ambient technologies in the upstream space where they're using centuries of data to optimize operations versus using corporate data. I'm going to tell you, in Canada and in the US, the companies don't like to share, right?
On our side, maybe we haven't quite hit that yet, but there's this perfect algorithm to interpret, you know, oil and gas assets in the boreal forest, right? But that will apply to all assets in the boreal forest. It might not apply to Midlands in the same regard, but there's certain just geophysical kind of proxies that get that federation of data, I'd say.
And with that, we've hit time. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today. We really appreciate you spending the time with us. That time went by very, very quickly. Welcome you back here tomorrow. We have a project cafe to cover the methane solutions. And then also in October, PTAC will be hosting a digital conference over at the Petroleum Club. So welcome you to attend that as well. So thank you again, panelists. Thank you, Carrie, Jeff, Paul, and Sean, who I want to call Nick from now on accidentally. But, but thank you very much. You've been exceptional. Thank you.